Max Verstappen finished second at the Hungarian Grand Prix, 15.080 seconds behind Lando Norris, after qualifying 6th and spinning on Saturday. That sounds like Red Bull suddenly found the answer. A breakthrough setup. A hidden change. A car transformed overnight. But Verstappen immediately destroyed that theory with 6 words. "I don't understand how we are second." There is no confirmed secret upgrade, no verified technical breakthrough, and no evidence that the RB22 suddenly became fast. In fact, Verstappen described one of his hardest races of the year, then revealed the problem Red Bull cannot hide. When instead of the tires degrading, your car is degrading, then you have a big problem. So what actually changed? The result changed. The car did not. And the real reason Verstappen reached second may expose something far more serious than Red Bull expected. Subscribe to the channel. To understand what actually changed inside Red Bull, you have to separate the result from the performance. Because those two things were not saying the same thing in Hungary. The result said Verstappen finished second. The performance said he qualified 6th, spun on Saturday, struggled with the RB22, and ended the race more than 15 seconds behind Lando Norris. That is not the profile of a car that suddenly found a hidden advantage. It is the profile of a driver extracting a result that the machinery did not appear ready to deliver. And this is where the mystery begins. On Saturday, Laurent Mekies admitted that Red Bull did not have the pace to match Ferrari and McLaren. He described qualifying as difficult for both Red Bull drivers. He also explained that the team's performance could change significantly from one weekend to another. And if Red Bull failed to get everything exactly right, it could fall backward very quickly. That warning matters. Because it tells us the RB22 was not operating with a comfortable margin. The car needed the setup, tires, circuit, and conditions to align. When they did not, the performance disappeared. Think of a door that only opens when the key is turned at exactly the right angle. The key still works. The lock is not completely broken. But the smallest movement can stop everything. That is what Red Bull's performance window appeared to look like in Hungary. Narrow, sensitive, and difficult to repeat. So when Verstappen climbed from 6th to 2nd, the immediate assumption was that something had changed overnight. Perhaps the balance improved. Perhaps the strategy unlocked the car. Perhaps Red Bull discovered a hidden setup direction. But the source confirms no specific technical change. No new component. No secret upgrade. No verified post-race statement from Mekies explaining a breakthrough. And Verstappen's own reaction makes the idea of a transformation even harder to believe. "I don't understand how we are second." That sentence exposes the truth behind the result. Verstappen did not feel as though the car had become the second fastest package. He did not describe a clear improvement. He did not say Red Bull had finally solved the balance. He sounded confused because the position did not match the experience. And that is a huge distinction. A genuine performance gain is something the driver can feel. The car turns more cleanly. The rear becomes easier to trust. The braking becomes more stable. The driver begins attacking instead of correcting. But Verstappen described one of his most difficult races of the year. The RB22 remained hard to handle. The problems persisted through much of the Grand Prix. And the gap to Norris showed that second place was not the same as fighting for victory. 15.080 seconds. That number matters. Because second place can create the illusion that Red Bull was close. The gap says McLaren was operating at another level. Verstappen may have reached the podium. But he was not controlling the race. He was trying to survive it. And the clearest evidence came from the way he described the car's deterioration. When instead of the tires degrading, your car is degrading, then you have a big problem. Tire degradation is normal. The rubber loses grip. The driver adjusts the pace. The team decides when to pit. Every driver expects that process. But when the car itself begins degrading, the problem becomes much harder to manage. The balance moves. The confidence disappears. A corner that felt acceptable earlier suddenly becomes unpredictable. And the driver cannot solve that with one switch or one careful lap. Imagine trying to run while the ground slowly changes beneath your feet. At first, the surface is firm. Then it becomes loose. Then every step requires a correction. You can continue moving. But you cannot move with the same commitment. That is what Verstappen was fighting. The car was not simply becoming slower because the tires were aging. It was becoming harder to understand. And an unpredictable car attacks the driver's confidence before it attacks the lap time. The driver brakes slightly earlier. He waits longer before applying the throttle. He makes more steering corrections. Each loss appears tiny. Together, they become the 15-second gap. That is why the idea that Verstappen was suddenly fast is misleading. He was not suddenly comfortable. He was not suddenly in control. The finishing position improved. The underlying weakness remained. And this is where Verstappen's talent becomes both Red Bull's greatest strength and its most dangerous disguise. A less effective driver may have finished much farther back. Then the problem would have been obvious. But Verstappen can turn difficult weekends into respectable results. He can survive instability. He can recognize opportunities. He can take advantage when the race changes around him. And that is impressive. But it can also make the car look healthier than it really is. Second place protected Red Bull from a poor result. It did not prove that Red Bull had solved the RB22. That may be the most important lesson from Hungary. The team did not leave with certainty. It left with a contradiction. The trophy said progress. The driver said confusion. The position said recovery. The pace said limitation. And the car's behavior said the problem was still alive. So what actually changed inside Red Bull? Based on the confirmed evidence, there was no verified hidden technical transformation. What changed was the race around Verstappen. The final order became more favorable. The opportunities appeared. And Verstappen extracted everything available from a car that still felt fundamentally difficult. But that creates a much bigger problem for the next race. Because circumstances cannot be developed. Luck cannot be copied. A rival's trouble cannot become part of Red Bull's technical plan. The team needs something repeatable. A stable car. A wider operating window. A package Verstappen understands before the checkered flag, not after it. Until that happens, every strong Red Bull result will carry the same question. Did the car truly improve? Or did Verstappen simply prevent everyone from seeing how serious the weakness had become? And that question becomes even more serious when you look at what Red Bull actually needs from this car. Not one surprising podium. Not one race saved by Verstappen. Not one result that looks strong until the driver begins explaining how difficult it really was. Red Bull needs repeatable speed. Speed it can understand. Speed it can reproduce. Speed that does not disappear the moment the circuit, temperature, tires, or setup moves slightly away from the perfect condition. That is the real difference between a fast car and a fragile one. A fast car gives the driver several ways to reach the result. A fragile car gives him one narrow path. Miss that path, and everything begins falling apart. Hungary suggested the RB22 may still be living inside that narrow path. On Saturday, the warning signs were obvious. Verstappen qualified 6th. He spun. The car did not have the pace to match Ferrari and McLaren. Laurent Mekies admitted that Red Bull could fall backward very quickly when everything was not exactly right. Then Sunday produced second place. But the contradiction never disappeared. The position improved. The car did not suddenly become easy. The balance did not suddenly become predictable. And Verstappen did not suddenly sound confident. He sounded confused. That is what makes his second place so difficult for Red Bull to celebrate without asking harder questions. Because a podium normally gives a team direction. This podium gave Red Bull doubt. Was the setup actually better? Did the car become more competitive? Did the tires behave differently? Did the race simply remove cars that might otherwise have finished ahead? The source does not provide a complete enough sequence to prove every reason behind the final order. So no single explanation can be treated as confirmed. But Verstappen's own words make one conclusion clear. He did not believe the car had suddenly become the second best package. That is the central point. And if the driver does not believe the position reflects the performance, the engineers cannot treat the result as proof that their development direction is working. They have to look deeper. Not at the trophy. At the behavior. Where did the balance begin changing? When did the car become harder to place? Did the problem appear as the fuel load dropped? Did it become worse as the tires aged? Did one type of corner expose the car more than another? Did Verstappen begin making more corrections as the race continued? The source does not provide verified telemetry to answer those questions. There is no confirmed throttle trace. No braking comparison. No corner speed map. No tire temperature data. So any claim that one hidden graph revealed the answer would be invented. But the absence of public telemetry does not make the problem disappear. It simply means the strongest evidence remains the driver's description. And that description was brutal. When instead of the tires degrading, your car is degrading, then you have a big problem. That line tells Red Bull the issue was not limited to normal tire wear. Something about the car's behavior was deteriorating through the race. The exact technical cause is not confirmed. But the effect was clear. The driver was losing confidence. And when confidence disappears, lap time disappears in places that may not look dramatic. A slightly earlier brake application. A slower release. A more cautious turn-in. A delayed throttle input. One extra steering correction. Each loss may be tiny. Together, they become several tenths. Then several seconds. Then the 15.080 second gap to Norris. That gap matters because it reveals the difference between finishing second and fighting for first. Verstappen was second in the classification. He was not second in control. Norris finished far enough ahead to show that McLaren had a stronger race package. That does not diminish Verstappen's result. It explains it. He delivered more than the car appeared capable of giving comfortably. And that may be the most dangerous situation for Red Bull. When the driver is too good at hiding the weakness, the team risks underestimating how serious the weakness has become. A poor result forces urgency. A podium can delay it. A sixth-place finish would have made the problem obvious. Second place allows everyone to say the weekend was recovered. But Verstappen did not allow that story to survive. I don't understand how we are second. That sentence was not modesty. It was not confusion for effect. It was a warning that the result did not match the car. And Red Bull now has to decide which version of Hungary it believes. The version in the championship table. Or the version Verstappen felt inside the cockpit. The table says second. The driver says the car was degrading. The table says recovery. The driver says one of his most difficult races of the year. The table says Red Bull remained close. The gap says Norris was more than 15 seconds ahead. Those are not small contradictions. They define the entire weekend. And this is where the idea of Verstappen being suddenly fast becomes misleading. He did not suddenly become faster. Verstappen was already fast. What changed was the result around him. The circumstances opened a path. He took it. That is what elite drivers do. They turn difficult races into strong finishes. They recognize when an opportunity appears. They stay alive long enough to benefit from chaos. And they extract points even when the car does not feel worthy of them. That is a skill. But it is not a technical solution. Red Bull cannot manufacture chaos. It cannot rely on rivals having problems. It cannot build a championship plan around the hope that Verstappen will keep rescuing the final order.